Here they come a-wassailing. Here's a look at the new NECA toys. This is the Gremlins Winter Gremlins 2-pack. A gadget salesman is looking for a special gift for his son and finds one at a store in Chinatown. A shopkeeper is reluctant to part with the mogwai but sells it to him with a warning to never expose it to bright lights, water, or feed it after midnight. All of this happens and the result is a gang of gremlins that decide to tear up the town on Christmas Eve. Now we're going to go ahead and get the review underway. The first thing we're going to do, the first thing we always seem to be doing on this channel, is figuring out how tall these figures stand. I've heard from many of you viewers, actually, that this comes rather in handy, because then you know exactly how tall the figures stand. Well, let me continue that trend during the holiday season to tell you that the figure stands 6.4 inches in height. And I think for the sake of this, I'm only going to tell you how tall one of them stands, because ideally they are the exact same figure, other than a few little tweaks with their costumes. Speaking of also standing, I can't help but notice, I'm sure you're probably asking yourself this, I can't help but notice you've got yourself display stands. Did they come included with the figures? They actually did not. They did not. I'm mentioning the fact that I did put them on stands just to kind of keep them as stable as I possibly can, but they didn't come included with the figures. So there you go. 6.4 inches. I got sidetracked. Seem to do that happen. That happens a lot here on this channel. 16.4, let's stay back on track. 16.4 centimeters tall is either one of the caroling gremlins. How about, while we're also at it, let's bring in some other figures for comparisons. This happens to be the ultimate gremlin, which pretty much is the starting point for what will be these ones on either side. There's not really that much different between them. And then, while we're also sticking to the theme of gremlins, why not? There is Ultimate Stripe, if I can get him to properly stand. Again, these figures are a lot like NECA's offering in the world of xenomorphs. They're great looking figures. The stability sort of comes problematic when it comes to their feet. If you can balance them okay, you shouldn't have too much the problem, but I think I usually just default to having them using clear stands. It's the #1 stamp, seal of approval, that the figures aren't going to fall over on you. Now, this is the first of 2 reviews that we're going to be looking at with the 2-pack Caroling Gremlins. NECA Toys is slating a release of 2 individual 2-packs. If that sounds right. 2 individual 2-packs. Well, 2 separate 2-packs, each with the Gremlins, featuring different clothing and all caroling outside your doorstep. We're going to be looking at this set first, and then immediately after that, we're going to windshield wiper our way over to the next review, and then, of course, we'll do some comparisons. So a bunch of Gremlins stuff coming your way. Let's have a look at the accessories, and don't worry, when we get to the second set, we're going to do some comparisons, just in case you guys are wondering. Included with this particular 2-pack, you get yourself a gingerbread man. I'm assuming it's a gingerbread man. It could be a gingerbread person. I mean, we don't have to specify the gender here in the case of the gingerbread individual here. It's been very nicely piped with icing, a skill I'm unable to perform myself. My cookies look disastrous. But I gotta say, this cookie looks decent enough. It's not burnt. It's been cooked well and maybe offered to the carolers after they've been singing the doorsteps. It's a nice, decent enough looking cookie. Kind of looks like Ronald McDonald if he was a gingerbread man. It's got some yellow there on the hands, the feet, the face, and buttons running down its chest. Doesn't wear clothing, but it's not questions we really want to pose when it comes to the gingerbread individual. It's just a neat looking cookie. And that's what it looks like on the back. The texturing actually even does look like it's cooked dough. Right down to the fact there's like these little cracks and stuff like that in the bottoms of the legs. Overall, decent looking cookie. If perhaps that's not your type of sweet, and maybe you're favoring something of the more mintier variety, they also do include a hooked candy cane. It is a standard shaped candy cane. This is what the candy cane would look like until I get to it, and then it ultimately just looks broken. And I always seem to get, unfortunately get the candy canes that are already broken. Isn't that just the ultimate bummer? It's like a pre-crushed, broken fortune cookie. The one thing it needs to be is stay in this shape. And gosh darn it, I hate having a broken candy cane, and that's the only option you have. It seems to me more affected by the smaller candy canes. Those are always broken. Spending a little too much time talking about candy canes, asks the viewing audience. Okay, well, needless to say, they do have the striped candy cane to come included with these figures. I'll talk no more about my broken candy cane experiences. The other things to come included, of course, these being carolers after all, is that you need actual carols to sing. I don't know specifically which carol this is. In fact, I keep continuing to have these upside down, but it seems with my little eye, because I have a very small microscopic eye on one side, but I'm looking through with that little eye, and it seems like the actual pages and the of course the notes are the same, which I guess would make sense. If these carolers are going door to door, they really want to practice this in advance. You don't want one caroler caroling the wrong song while the other one is sticking to the plan. These are done in laminated plastic, kind of a plastic paper. It is a cardboard material, but feeling it definitely feels like there's something on top of it, like it's got more of a slick kind of gloss finish to it. Still, ultimately, when it's all said and done, it just boils down to these still being cardboard, which I guess is still fine. I don't expect them to be molded plastic because, of course, there would be little to no give to these. And again, they serve what purpose they need to serve. There's a close-up look. We don't really even know what song this is. I don't know if anyone would be skilled enough to freeze the camera, freeze the video, I should say. Look at that. I'd be able to decipher what song that is. It would be ironic if NECA Toys slipped something in there where like this was actually the notes to not necessarily a Christmas carol, but perhaps a little song, like a nod to NECA Toys or something else. Maybe that is actually the melody for Gremlins, the Gremlin theme. Now that would be kind of cool as well, but they do come included with these. Something I do want to note, though, about them, I'm going to go ahead and take this one. There's no specific reasoning why I picked this one over the other one, but they are the same figure, basically head to toe. You can vary that by, of course, having the mouth open and close so that one looks a little bit different than the other. But like even the pattern work looks very similar, if not identical, back and forth when you look them from this to this, and then this to this. Of course, what does change on them is their clothing. But before we kind of get into talking about that, one thing I want to talk about is the way that they hold, I don't know what you would call these. Are these just specifically carolers' notes? I don't know if there's an actual term, a technical term. A caroler, a professional caroler. If you are a professional caroler, let me know. Just let me know. You don't have to call me. I mean, that's the gesture of calling, but you don't have to actually call me. But I would love to know a little bit more about what it's like to be a professional caroler. I'm asking for a friend, by the way. The one thing I do want to mention, though, is for the carolers' notes, they do have a tricky time of fitting in the fingers. And I guess one thing that it's supposed to be, and is the fact of, it's not so much this hand. This hand kind of just openly grabs, kind of mauls it like an orange on this side. But the other problem is this finger right here. The only thing I can deduce from the way that they put the finger, let me just show you what's going on here. The hands are clearly not the same to one another. This one looks like it wants to be holding something, like a cloved stuffed orange. Do we even do that anymore? I don't know. We're talking about stuff that you would do in daycare and kindergarten. I'm going to clove an orange, I think, this year for Christmas time. Why not? It just feels right. Finding cloves might be a little bit difficult. Bulk barn, I think, is probably the solution to that problem. But clearly, you can see, like, the hands. I'm really trailing off here. The hands are different from one another. This one is kind of more the mauling, gripping hand. This is kind of more the meticulous hand. You can see the fingers aren't placed quite the same to one another. But the big problem is this finger right here. If you put the caroler notes, we're going to go with that as the description for it. It fits into this hand okay, but you really feel like you're fighting to get it into the hand of this one, and it throws it on an angle. Now, I suppose if you're looking at it from the standpoint of them caroling, the notes probably are in the proper place. I mean, that makes some sense, and maybe the angle of the way that it's resting against this finger, so it's not terrible. Or the other thing you can do is rest the notes. Let me just see if I can get this going here. Rest the notes. There we go. It's always this. It seems like the hands fight against one another based on the kind of sculpts that they are. I was going to say the other thing you could do is sit the notes right on this finger, like that, if that makes any sense. The thing you have to do is just kind of compensate it for on this hand here. There we go. If only like the hands were exactly the same shape, obviously, and just being the mirror opposite to one another, I don't feel like I would have as much the issue. It seems just fighting between the two different shapes of hands is what's causing the caroler's notes just to not sit properly. And again, you just kind of drape it in between. Just bring this hand down a little bit. There we go. I certainly don't want 15 minutes of review simply just to be looking at these notes and how they sit in between the fingers. There we go. You can also do that as well. The problem is they just don't sit very well. And the biggest issue really is the fact that the hands compete with one another. If they were both this shape on that side, and that side, obviously that would make sense. If they were this mold on this side, I think you also couldn't have the type of problems I find I'm having with getting the caroler's notes to sit into the hands. And just ultimately, maybe this is really the better of the two hands. This gripping hand is really causing a lot of the problem. Anyways, the notes do sit in their hand. I did do this in rehearsals much easier. I don't know why I'm struggling so much with this now, but the notes, like I said, do fit into their hands. Awkwardly, yes, but they do fit into their hands. Producers are telling me to move on. We're going to move on. So having a look at both the figures, I guess we can go ahead and take this one off the stand, like that. I'll show you what both the figures look like side by side, and back to back. They are exactly the same. There's nothing that's really changed on the pattern, and I guess I'm not disappointed for the fact that the patterns are so different to one, or so similar to one another. I don't expect them to change. Obviously, in Gremlins versus Gremlins 2: The New Batch, patterns and the way that their stripes and spots did change to make the Gremlins unique to one another. In the original Gremlins, they were sort of more kind of consistent clones to one another, and really what only changed was the things that they wore. Case in point, here's the carolers. Both the carolers are very stark and different in the fact that both their scarves are obviously quite different. This one has the pattern of the plaid done here against the backdrop of a kind of a darker gray scarf. Both of these, by the way, are just loose-fitting plastic molded around the neck, and I guess if you wanted to, you could take the head completely off to free the scarf. But then ultimately, if you're just going to be doing that, you're really only resulting in getting an ultimate gremlin. I mean, there's nothing that's going to be that much different between it. This one here does have the more knit scarf. Very nicely done. And again, it sits. Let me just put this one down for a second. This one sits again on a loose plastic. They've given enough leeway that it doesn't restrict, of course, when we start looking at the posability on the figure. The actual knitting of this is also something much like my ability to pipe. Going back to that, piping icing on a cookie are two trades that I would like to be able to pick up. Unfortunately, I think that's going to be a long time before I perfect either one of them. Imagine knitting your own scarf from start to finish. Any scarf knitters out there? Let me know in the comment section. We're going to just get some community interactions going on here. It kind of also looks a little bit like a fruit roll-up. You can see it's been done in a soft plastic. No real additional shading, although it does look like the sections on the bottom, I mean, not obviously the raised sections of the knitting, but it kind of almost appears like it's a darker color. I don't know if it's just my eyes playing tricks on me. And then, of course, the other thing that's different between the two is the hats. This hat just happened to fall off. One is, I love this, one is a Neca hat, or here in Canada, we would call these toques. The toques are removable. Somebody right now is Googling toques. It's such a thing. It really does exist. One is a white toque with a pom-pom on the end. Somebody had told me that this had something to do with the miners. I don't know if that's true or not, but you have NECA written across the front. or I guess what would be the top of the hat. And it's grooved in such a way that it basically just sits over the existing mold of the Ultimate Gremlin. And it fits around the ears. There's a opening right there. And there's an opening, yeah, right there. And then that just fits around their ears. And there we go, just line it up like that. They're obviously going to be loose, so any bit of moving, if you tilt the figure upside down, let's try that now. Oh, it did survive the blizzard test. So far, so good. As I would say that, so far, so good. So it's really neat the fact that they do have the individual hats. Now this one does have, I'm just going to put this one down here for a second. Get him to stand. There we go. This one does have kind of, again, like a knitted hat. Whoever's Nana is this gremlin really does know how to knit some decent, cool-looking stuff. Seems to be using also the same similar type of pattern. Now, this is an all-blue hat, as you can clearly see, and it's still got the little notations, little openings there on either side, and that just fits over top of his head. Just kind of sits on his ears. I don't know if I feel as confident doing the, oh, look at that, the blizzard test on this one. But you can see how different just the change of clothing changes one gremlin to the other. Other than that, if you were to take them off, strip them of their scarves and let them freeze outside, that's not fun. They would be literally the same gremlin. I always kind of wondered if they were out in the snow and the snow melted, wouldn't they populate? Or even in the fact that they're stepping in snow, obviously sooner or later that's going to get wet moisture. Wouldn't that also make them multiply? Or I guess that would kill them, wouldn't it? Water would kill them. No, water would make them mass populate. That's right, it's sunlight. Sunlight would kill the gremlins. I'm getting so sidetracked looking at these well-tailored, dressed gremlins. I'm getting lost in the rules of the gremlin lore. So yes, if you got them wet, so if they're walking out in the snow, wouldn't they just continue to multiply? It's a question I'm just going to leave open because I'm sure it's just an open movie plot hole. Needless to say, though, both the figures look exquisite to one another. And again, ultimately, when it's all said and done, get the figures to stand here once again. When it's all said and done, ultimately, it still boils back to these being just simply the original Ultimate Gremlin. We'll just put him back, put this one back, and we'll put this one in the middle. It still really boils down to they're just the exact same figure as the Ultimate Gremlin right here. So let's have a look at the posability on both of these. I guess we'll only just really look at one of them because obviously that one is going to be the exact same. And without hopefully losing the hat, I'll talk about the articulation on all these figures. The head rotates back and forth. It hinges up and down. That's all from the benefit of a ball joint. They do also have ball jointed ears, so you can move those back and forth. Of course, with these, the problem comes when you start moving the ears. The hat obviously is going to start getting shifted around on you, and they do have open and closed mouths. If they're caroling, after all, you probably would want to have articulation in the mouths, and you can see Neca have done that. Great looking head sculpts. For the arms are a little bit more trickier because they've got these kind of ridged shoulders, disrupting a bit of the posability for moving the arms out this way. But you can certainly move the arms back and forth. They have a single bend in the elbow, allowing also a rotation back and forth on the forearm. And you can rotate the hands back and forth as well, hinging that way. Upper torso is the ball joint. And of course you've got the ball jointed legs, forward and back happening there, a bend at the knee. And then you've got a secondary bend happening right there. A hind leg bend, if you will, similar to the xenomorphs. Finishing things off, you also have articulation in the feet. Now, speaking of feet, we can tip those upside down. I'm sure I mentioned this already. They have sculpted feet, which is certainly a good thing, a blessing, but also a burden as well. By making them not flat feet completely does cause some issues with proper flat footing. If the feet were simply flat, obviously you wouldn't have an issue. The figures could stand perfectly fine. But couple for the fact that they do have the hind leg hinges and the fact that they don't have flat feet completely does cause some problems, not all the time, mind you, but some problems with having the figures properly stand. Again, if you did manage to get this guy, it does benefit you certainly for the holiday season. If you want to be putting them out for Christmas time, you probably may not be putting these out all year round unless you're a big fan of Gremlins like I am. But most definitely, This guy you could probably have out all year round. These two, on the other hand, you may only want to put out every holiday season and celebrate when the big man comes down the chimney. No, not the salesman dad, not the guy with the toothbrush, the automatic toothbrush. No, I mean Santa Claus. Santa Claus. And could you imagine Santa Claus coming down and being greeted by these two carolers? He probably would be going up the chimney as quickly as he came down. Despite for the fact that gremlins are walking around in a winter wonderland, which just by itself baffles my brain. I know you've set the rules in place that the gremlins can't get wet or they'll mass populate, but then you set the movie in a snowy environment and you've got caroling gremlins outside. I'm no rocket scientist, but I can put two and two together. Snow is ultimately still frozen water. Wouldn't that be still a bit of an issue? Gremlins outside in snow? Even a snowflake falling on them, even if it's frozen water, it's still wet. If they spill sodas on them, does that count as well? It's plot holes. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's considered this over the years, but I can tell you this. Every holiday season, around Christmas time, of course, I watch Gremlins as a regular tradition, and I watch Die Hard. Ironically, two films that you wouldn't really consider to be Christmas movies by conventional standards. There's no big guy in a red Santa suit walking around. But ultimately, because those two films take place during the holiday season, I guess many people really consider Gremlins and Die Hard both Christmas films. Let me know down below if you do. A rant, I'm sure, that can wait for a later day. I mean, obviously talking about the Gremlins Winter Gremlins 2-pack. I really do like these quite a bit. It was one of those inevitable, I hope NECA Toys makes these sort of thought that popped in my head. I mean, we already ultimately have an Ultimate Gremlin. The next logical step is simply just, well, what can we put on that existing figure? Which is basically what NECA have done right here. The molds are no different than the Ultimate Gremlin, but simply by giving them hats, or here in Canada we call them toques, and scarves, you all of a sudden make them feel very different than their previous release. I like the fact that these ones are also unique to one another. A nice little nod is the fact that they also put NECA as the top of one of the toques. And overall, I'm just really happy with how this one turned out. The set of these two turned out. The only thing I would have said is probably the change of a mold in hand. It seems like the hands are the same as the ones we had gotten before, which can cause a bit of a problem with them holding properly the caroling notes, if you would still call them notes. Having them holding them in their hands, ultimately I settled on what I feel is a good enough angle. Having them angled down, you can kind of sit them across the fingers, and that seems like a good enough job, but it does feel like one hand does compete with the other for holding those notes properly in their hands. Other than that, I'm really happy with this set. It's not something I would likely find myself putting out all year round. I mean, I do that now with my Gremlins figures that I have in my collection. These ones I'll keep extra special, along with those other holiday-themed figures, and I think I'll only put them out during the holiday season. I'm just crazy like that. But again, Gremlins took place in a snowy environment. Snow is wet. Snow is frozen water. Okay. We won't talk about that anymore. If you managed to pick up the set for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of the figures. Soda, like, wouldn't that get them? Okay, we'll stop. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments section, friends and members of the mob. What you guys think of the Gremlins Winter Gremlins 2-pack. And while you're figuring out for yourself what you're going to write down for your comments, keep in mind as well, we're going to have a look at the other Winter Gremlins 2-pack. And don't worry, we'll also do some comparisons left and right between this set and the set that we will be having a look at in an upcoming video. I know I'm kind of giving away all the secrets underneath the tree. It's I have a tough time keeping secrets. I'm usually the person that says, like, you know what that is, and the person's like, no, I don't want to know. I don't. Yeah, but just guess. Yeah. Just guess. I'm horrible when it comes to gift giving. Anyways, though, give yourself the gift of subscribing to this channel if you haven't done so already. If you're liking the content that's coming out here on a regular basis, and you don't want to be the person that's missing out, certainly hit that subscribe button, and why not, while you're also at it, check out the home page of this channel. Kind of just frolic in the snowfall and see all the other videos that I put on the homepage. See if there's anything you may have missed along the way. We're going to have a whole bunch of NECA reviews coming up in the future videos, including, as I mentioned, the Gremlins Winter Gremlins 2-pack, which I don't know if I would just call it the Winter Gremlins 2-pack 1 and 2-pack 2. I don't know, we'll have to figure out something. Either way, guys, stay tuned as always, and thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.